My great pleasure to introduce to you, for those of you who do not know the wonderful Lee Harris yet, he's agreed, a great honor it is to be on the channel today. And I'm just going to give him a round of applause. Here goes.
Bracha, the honor is mine. Thank you for having me.
It's just a delight to be with you today, Lee. I think a lot of people already know you. Lee Harris Energy. Lee is an intuitive, a way shower. He does monthly energy forecasts on YouTube, which I think many of you already see. I certainly follow them, find them extremely valuable. And he also does weekly podcasts. He's got a members portal where you can go more deeply into his work. And he's also a musician. He produces videos, audios, music, retreats, trainings, workshops. Your work is so vast, Lee. Where do we start? I'm so curious about every aspect of your life. I don't really know where to start. So where would you like to start today? What would you like to share about you and your life at this time?
Thank you. And you were one of my favorite guests on my weekly podcast. And like I said to you, when we just touched in before we started, when I went to bed last night and I knew I was going to be with your shining, bright energy this morning, I was like, oh, that's great. That's how I start my day, with a good dose of Bracha. So thank you so much. I think, it's funny, as you asked me that question, what comes to mind is channeling. And I was someone who, through my teens, like many of us, had various issues, or, you might call them wounds, or things I needed to heal, basically, to try and pull myself out of some of the compression and suppression that I was living in. And what I now realize years and years later that I didn't know at the time is it was my sensitivity and my intuition that I was abandoning, or that I didn't know how to access, as is the case for many of us if we aren't taught or trained. So I took myself into the self-growth and metaphysical field as a student, and it was love at first touch. Like many, I'm sure, I would do whatever I was doing in the week, whether it was I was at university or whether it was one of the many jobs I had. And then at the weekend or at night, my passion would be to come home, and it was either music or self-growth. They were kind of the two places. And honestly, music is a healing force. So, but what happened to me when I was 23 is I heard the voice of my guides. And I think it was a very positive influence on me as a person, because it was very challenging. I did not want to be a channeler. And honestly, I was a little skeptical of channeling, even though I was, a fully signed up member of the healing world. Channeling to me just was like a bridge too far. I would have rather been a tarot reader, because to me that was still a bit more grounded. You're connecting with the other side, but it's not necessarily going to those levels where you're speaking to guides and beings. And also being British and living in England at the time, because I've lived in America now for 9 years. It wasn't the coolest or the most comfortable thing to have to be able to tell my friends. But long story short, after many years of channeling privately in secret and for friends who knew me, I had a partner at the time who was also a channeler. And so we started doing work together. And it's interesting. I didn't know there was like a whole channeling world. Like there were people who wanted to go to channeled events, and especially here in America. So I found that, after doing approximately, I would say 7 or 8 years of working as a channeler and also as a facilitator and guiding people through their spiritual process, I had come to recognize that while channeling is a fantastic thing, and like any practice, it can greatly enhance and change your life, it was best used as part of a balanced diet. If you only went to channeling all the time, you could find yourself out there, or you could make decisions that were rooted in spirit that were blowing up in your face on earth. And I went through those periods, and I saw lots of people going through those periods. So the reason that I started doing energy updates was I thought it's a way that I can take some of that channeled information, but come down the ladder rungs a few steps and explain it in more human terms as to how it might be showing up for us. So that was how I ended up doing my energy updates. And I think that's how you and I found each other, because unbeknownst to each other, we would both enjoy each other's videos, and then we connected, and yeah, the rest is history.
Yes, yes. Gosh, that's you've piqued my interest. I'd like to go a little deeper, if I may, because I'm curious. I notice this is a word that you use on many of your Impact the World interviews. You say, I'm curious, because you are genuinely interested in the people that you speak to. Yes, you really have wonderful listening skills. I wonder if that's something that you always had. Was this something very natural to you as a musician, that you were always a good listener and always very observant? Is this a quality, would you say, that of a good intuitive?
I think probably my listening, like probably many people, has developed over the years. I know for sure there were times in my 20s I wish I'd listened more, but that was my 20s. So I think the listening actually for me with people, and I think you know this because you've done your private readings too. I gave personal sessions for, I think it was 14 years before I stopped in 2019. And yes, it was 15 years. And I think that cultivates a way of focusing on somebody and of receiving about somebody that I think then by the time I got to Impact the World, what was really important to me with my podcast, I didn't want to just be another podcast where people interviewed people about the work they were doing, even though there's great value in that. I feel, especially in the spiritual community, and I know this happened to me, when we first come into the spiritual community, there can tend to be a distancing between ourselves and the teacher or the speaker or the astrologer or the intuitive that we follow.
Yes.
And it's not actually even about distancing yourself from that human being. We've all been trained to distance ourselves from spirit, whether it's God or whether it's spirit. And the problem with that distance is it leaves you in a risky place. So it's not good for a teacher or a speaker to be guru-ized. It's not good for them either. It might take some of them years and years to work that out when it all falls apart. But it's not good for anyone when we're in that place of seeing power as outside ourselves. And I think it's normal because we have been so undercultivated spiritually as people, for us to think, oh, I don't know anything about that. I'll just give all my power away to Bracha or to this other person. And I think there's a maturation process that you go through. So for me, with Impact the World, what I wanted to do, and I'm not always successful at this. I suppose it depends also on the person I'm talking to and where they will go. But I wanted to demystify and bring in the humanness and the journey of people who were out there in the world doing things that were impactful, because I knew that more and more of us were going to be needed to do our thing. And that doesn't always look like you have to write a book or you have to have a YouTube channel. But the truth is, the lessons are the same. If you are wanting to create something in your local community for 20 people, the lessons and the stuff that you'll go through internally can be very similarly mapped onto what somebody will go through when they're taking on an endeavor that perhaps involves more people or is more public. So I wanted to get under the hood of as many different minds and journeys as I could, in the hope that Impact the World would not only introduce people to great people doing great work in the world like yourself, but more importantly, make them go, oh, I see. That's how Bracha got through that. Or Lee just shared a personal story of what he got through. for me, that's always the best. Like I'm not interested in hearing people's accolades. It really doesn't interest me at all. I'm really interested in hearing about the struggle and how someone got through it, because if I hadn't figured out how to get through some of my struggles at the levels that I've managed to get through them, I would have been in a very bad place now. So that for me is I think why the gift of that podcast for me is when I and a speaker like yourself really go there and really get vulnerable and honest about what's going on. That is a gift to me as well, and hopefully to the viewers and the listeners.
Yes, yes. I mean, every time I see one of your episodes coming out, I'm like, oh, goody, there's a new one. He's just released another one. Yes. So it's really exciting. And it brings me on to, I was fascinated to learn your journey, that in 2004, I believe, was when you started doing these private readings for, I think you had like a donation of about £10 when you started.
Yeah, because I was working in a pub. Yes. And I was working in a pub. I was trying to get music going. So I had a job in a pub and I had a job in my friend. A pub, by the way, is a bar. If you're not from England or Ireland or Scotland. Yeah, and I'm sure it's called a pub somewhere else in the world too. But so I had a job in a bar at night, and I worked for my friend's business doing admin in the day. So she was a horse whisperer and she booked private clients, and she also promoted some horse whisperers in the UK, which wasn't a world I was familiar with, but I loved it. I thought, oh, this is great. So I was doing work for her. And the readings were something that I had been doing privately for friends, just as, you know, as gifts and as training for a few years. And I did one for a yoga teacher friend, and she said to me, you should do this. You should be doing this as a job. And I was like, oh, no. You know, all the stuff oh my God, I couldn't. What a responsibility. And what if I get it wrong? And, you know, all that stuff that you go through. And luckily, I was in a period where I was going to workshops to overcome fear. I mean, that was my focus that year. I mean, there were many focuses, but that year I was trying to say yes when I wanted to say no. Not against good, you know, not stupidly. Like, you know, if someone said, jump off this building, I might go, no, I don't think so. But I was trying to say yes when I recognized my fear was coming from unknowns rather than knowns. So I said yes. I didn't think anyone would come. And yeah, I did 60 clients in 60 days. And what happened was it spread and people would tell their friends. And I also think there was no financial barrier. I think if I'd have gone out there and been £50 or £100, it would have been a very different story. But I would never have done that, because at that point I wasn't tested. I wasn't proved to myself, and I wasn't going to charge people properly until I knew that it was working. So the reason I came up with £10 was I knew it would take me 75 to 90 minutes to do each reading, because I was writing them all at the time, about 2,000 words. Luckily, I was a fast typer, and I would write what I'd hear for this person and a response to their questions. And I thought, well, I earn £7 an hour in the pub. So if I could earn £10 for an hour and a half, well, that's great. I would rather do this than, you know, so honestly, it was, if I think, and still when I think back to it, it was, I mean, I think in a way it looks like a miracle to me when I look around at what I'm doing now, because I could never have foreseen this, or the development of it, or all the things that me and my team get to do. But I'll go right back to, it was a miracle to me that I was doing that for work very privately, because no one in my life really knew what I was doing, at least for the first 6 to 12 months. And having these deeply intimate experiences with people I would probably never meet, who would send me emails saying they were crying and thank you so much. So honestly, it was the most extraordinary, heart-opening, mind-opening time.
Thank you.
And you know, because you've held space for people in that way. It's an incredible privilege, and it's incredibly intimate. And for a while, it can kind of make other interactions seem quite boring. I think there's a period you go through, you're like, oh God, I went really deep with this person today, so I can't just sit here and talk about EastEnders right now. You know, you get over it, you adjust, but there's definitely a period where your life changes because of it.
Yes, most definitely. And what's amazing is that how have you gone from, in what I see as a relatively short time period, Lee, from £10 an hour to a 7-figure business with 14 international production crew and all the people who are working with you as a great team, producing, and you've got this wonderful, wonderful course that you're doing to help people own their value, own your value, I believe. And
It
if you'd
is.
like to talk more about that, because there's only a short window to sign up for that.
Sure.
So please tell us a little more.
You know what was so interesting? Before Impact the World was a podcast, it was the name of my first ever live training for healers who wanted to do it for work. And not just healers, creatives too. I had a lot of artists come. And I often say that the starving artist and the starving healer mentality are the same, because I've been both. You know, I've been the starving artist who couldn't get his music off the ground. And I was never actually a starving healer. That was the weirdest thing about it. It kind of, after 2 years, I was able to go full time. So I do recognize I was very lucky that I was able to almost effortlessly, while I was trying to make something else work, this other thing on the left was blowing up around me. And all I had to do was keep showing up and do the work. So when I did this training, it was 5 days long, and I took people through 22 modules. It was big. I mean, we would do like 9:30 to 7 p.m. every day. And the most interesting thing was, of all these 22 sessions, every time I went into a session that either involved money or self-confidence, people in the room froze. And I was like, wow. And I had some, there were some people in that room who were, and money isn't the important thing, but just to give you a context, some of the people in that room were making 6 figures a year, which to me is a huge success. Like, to be able to make 6 figures a year doing your passion is you've already won as far as I'm concerned. So it was so interesting to me. I thought, wow, look at this. Every time I teach one of these modules that comes around, that goes to our value or to money, the room freezes. And there were 65 people from all over the world in that room. So that really told me, oh, owning our value is a huge block. That's actually one of the biggest blocks. Now, I knew this personally because every time I would raise my prices with my personal sessions, I would go through all kinds of stuff, emotionally, but I would always know it was time. It was like, no, you can do this. The people who can afford to work with you will pay the money, and then you will use the money to pay people to help you create free videos. So to me, there was a logic. The logic was, if I can hire myself out and people value what I do at this level, and I have a 3-month waiting list, I'm in the position, not saying you should, but for me, I was in the position where I could raise my prices, and then I could use that money to pay team members. And I started off with 1 team member, then I got 2. And just as time went on, I think the biggest key to it, honestly, is I realized many years later that for me, my self-growth that used to be contained in healing and spirituality had very actively become the work I did. So in much the same way that the work I offer out hopefully helps and supports the people who resonate with it. And of course, there'll be loads of people who don't like the way I do it or don't resonate with me. That's fine. That's always going to happen. But for me, the growth was internal. And every time I grew, I went through a big change. And I almost quit doing this work in end of 2015. I was wondering about stopping. I was wondering about stopping doing the videos on YouTube. And it's interesting. I got offered the opportunity by an agency to go on tour across America. And I didn't know what to do at that point. I was still thinking, am I going to stop this? Is this too intense for me? Could I be doing something better? Because I think I'd got to a plateau. And I went on this tour and meeting all the people. And we actually also went to Germany and Australia. All the people I met changed my mind, because they would come up to me at the end of an event and they would say, your video in some of the biggest cases, your video saved me from depression, or your video pulled me out of what I was in. And my truth about this is, for anyone watching or listening, you would be amazed what you can offer, whether that's to your friend or whether that's on YouTube or in a book. We often doubt what we have to offer each other, and yet the truth is we all have something to offer each other. So my shift really around the work was when I had that epiphany that I wanted to carry on because I saw what it was doing for people, and that actually was enough for me. Like, my heart got touched. Then I thought, okay, I need to do this differently going forward. I need to grow. And I don't know what that will look like, but I'm going to make an intention that I'll grow. And so then I started studying, and I started looking at, I learned a bit more about business, which was an area I'd freaked out about and stayed away from. But when I did study business, I was like, oh, I've been quite intuitive about business all along. And actually, there are aspects of me that know how to do this. So it's been a real growth journey for me. And the reason I created Own Your Value was because I wanted to, give a bit of a roadmap to people who resonate with either the way I do it or the way I teach it, or some of the elements of my work that they wanted to know the behind the scenes of. And it's a lot of the course is mindset. So I actually spend a lot of time walking people through their thoughts and feelings about things, in a way reverse engineering some of the stuff I went through the hard way, I hope. And based on feedback, it seems to be working. That was the big shift for me. I would say 2016 was the year that I committed more than ever, after giving myself almost a year of considering stopping.
Gosh, well, I have to say, we're very glad you didn't stop.
Thank you. Well, I am too.
Really?
I am too. Hi everyone, I'm Lee, and I have been doing my work in the spiritual field for 18 years now, which blows my mind when I stop and think about it. Along the way, I have met many people who I have either coached individually or who have come to me to learn more about how to bring your spiritual gift, your healing gift, your intuitive gift into your work, and how to have this be your work. I created a course a few years ago called Own Your Value, because this was one of the sticking points I noticed for anybody who wants to have a successful business life around healing. And business tends to be this dirty word, and money can have connotations for people. But if we can clean up our relationship to those aspects, we can not only have a career that fulfills us, but a career that does the good in the world that you would like to see it do. We have been adding different pieces to the course over the last few years, and this year is no different. I'm going to be doing a whole new module called the Entrepreneurial Map. So it's a journey well worth taking, and I hope you'll consider having me as your guide through the process, and I and my team look forward to welcoming you to Own Your Value.